Hello, everyone. The Rahmath Hospital stood tall on the outskirts of Los Angeles, a white-painted building symbolizing hope for thousands. This place was not just a hospital, but also a spiritual oasis. Inside, there was a small mosque where daily prayers and Quranic verses resonated, enveloping the place in an aura of peace. However, one scorching summer night, that tranquility turned into a harrowing ordeal. That afternoon, the Los Angeles sky began to redden. The air felt hot, hotter than usual. Dr. Aisha Karim, the director of Rahmath Hospital, was finishing a meeting with her medical team when shocking news came over the radio broadcast. Attention! A massive wildfire is sweeping through western Los Angeles. Strong winds have caused the fire to spread rapidly, and residents are urged to evacuate immediately. The threatened areas include the district near Rahmath Hospital. Those words instantly created tension in the room. Dr. Aisha immediately stood up, her face turning serious. "We must prepare for the worst," she said firmly. The hospital staff sprang into action. Patients on the upper floors were moved to the safer underground areas. Critical patients, including a young boy named Adam who was in a coma, were prioritized. But not everything went smoothly. Amid the evacuation, Layla, a young nurse, noticed that the hospital's backup generator was malfunctioning. "Dr. Aisha, we have a major problem. If the power goes out, we won't be able to keep the ICU equipment running," she said, panic evident in her voice. Dr. Aisha took a deep breath. "Call the technicians immediately. We cannot lose a single life tonight," she replied with determination. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, the situation was worsening. Strong winds carried ash and embers through the air. The streets were filled with panicked people trying to flee, yet some of them were running toward Rahmath Hospital, the only place in the area deemed safe. Amid the chaos, Imam Ali, the leader of the mosque inside the hospital, stood in the front yard. Calmly, he lifted the mosque's loudspeaker and called the Adhan, Islamic call to prayer. His voice echoed in the air, bringing a sense of calm amid the commotion. Some people stopped running and turned toward the hospital, seeking shelter. "This hospital is a sanctuary for everyone," Imam Ali told the refugees who began filling the hospital grounds. "Stay calm. We will face this together." But the threat grew more imminent. By 10 p.m., flames were visible from the hospital's rooftop. The sky glowed orange, and the smell of smoke seeped into the building. Fire truck sirens could be heard in the distance, but everyone knew the firefighters wouldn't reach the area anytime soon. The wind continued to drive the fire closer. In the control room, Dr. Aisha examined a fire map displayed on an emergency device. Her face grew increasingly tense. "If the wind doesn't change direction within the next 2 hours, the fire will reach us," she told her team. Suddenly, a loud noise erupted outside. Boom! An explosion occurred in one of the blocks near the hospital, likely from a burning fuel tank. The vibration was felt inside the building, causing some patients and staff to scream in fear. The hospital lights flickered, heightening the tension. Amid the chaos, Imam Ali once again called for prayer. This time, he invited everyone there. Muslims, Christians, Jews, and even those without faith, to join together in seeking protection. People gathered in the yard, raising their hands in prayer, their voices blending into a chorus of hope in multiple languages. In this tense atmosphere, Dr. Aisha stepped out of the hospital and joined them. "We've done everything we can. Now we leave the rest to Allah. But remember, we will not give up," she said with unwavering conviction. As the night wore on, the fire drew closer, and the tension reached its peak. Under the fiery red sky, the hospital stood like a final fortress. All anyone could do was wait and hope. Would a miracle truly come? The night grew later, and the flames began to loom from the distance. Rahmat Hospital, which had always been a sanctuary for everyone, now appeared as a small island surrounded by a sea of fire. Thick black smoke filled the air, making every breath feel heavy. Dr. Aisha stood in the control room, monitoring the fire map, which showed that they were directly in the path of the flames. Hot winds slammed against the hospital windows, shaking the surrounding trees like a real threat from nature. "Leave the hospital, Aisha. You've already done so much. Everyone will understand if you save yourself," said one of her colleagues, Dr. Malik, with a worried expression. But Dr. Aisha, with a determined look in her eyes, replied, "No one leaves here until the last patient is safe. This hospital is more than just a building. It's a home to the hopes of many. I will not give up." Outside the hospital, the situation was becoming more intense. Imam Ali, who had been leading prayers in the front yard, was now surrounded by hundreds of people. They consisted of patients, their families, and refugees seeking shelter. "Everyone, don't panic," Imam Ali shouted, raising both hands. "We will fight this together. Those who can help, stay on watch. Those who can pray, pray with all your strength. We still have time, and we have each other." Hearing the call, a group of young men who had previously hesitated began to act. They took water buckets from a small well in the hospital yard and formed a human chain, trying to put out small embers that had started to jump into the surrounding shrubs. On the other side, Layla, the young nurse who never hesitated in the face of challenges, was busy assisting patients in the ICU. A young boy named Adam, who was still in a coma, was her priority. The ventilator that kept Adam alive was connected to the backup generator, which was running low on power. Layla knew that if the electricity went out, Adam wouldn't survive. "Dr. Aisha, our generator only has enough power for 1 more hour," Layla shouted over the emergency communication radio. "Hang in there, Layla. I'll find a way," Dr. Aisha replied, though she knew the situation was nearly impossible. Just then, a group of local residents from the multi-religious community arrived at the hospital. They brought simple fire extinguishing tools, water tanks, and even food and drink for the refugees. "We heard what's happening here, and we can't just stand by," said one of them, an elderly woman named Mrs. Carter. "This place is a symbol of hope. We'll help however we can." Seeing the help arrive, spirits within the hospital began to rise. Muslim and Christian youths worked side by side, carrying water buckets to the hospital's perimeter, where the fire had begun to spread. A Jewish teenager named Daniel climbed to the roof to douse the sparks threatening the solar panels. But amid the chaos, an incident nearly brought disaster. The oxygen tank in one of the emergency rooms began to overheat due to the high outside temperatures. If the tank exploded, the entire hospital could collapse in seconds. Dr. Aisha immediately ran to the room with several staff members. "We need to cool it down," she shouted. Without hesitation, they used wet cloths and water to try and lower the temperature of the tank. Time seemed to slow. As their hands grew tired, Imam Ali suddenly appeared with a bucket of ice from the hospital cafeteria. "Use this," he said, tossing the ice onto the tank. Their efforts finally succeeded. The oxygen tank cooled down, saving the hospital from immediate destruction. But their struggle was far from over. At 3 a.m., the situation reached its peak. The fire was now less than 50 meters from the hospital. The smoke was so thick that many began to have difficulty breathing. Patients inside the building, although most had been evacuated to the basement, still felt the intense heat. In the front yard, prayers in various languages continued to echo. Imam Ali led the zikr, while Mrs. Carter led a Christian prayer with a group of others. They stood side by side, pleading for protection from the Almighty. Suddenly, something extraordinary happened. The wind, which had been driving the fire closer, abruptly changed direction. The wind now blew the flames away from the hospital, as if an invisible force was protecting the place. Everyone paused for a moment, staring at the sky, which began to show signs of a miracle. The fire slowly began to recede, and Rahmat Hospital stood strong, untouched. However, the night was not over. Dr. Aisha realized that the emergency generator was nearly dead, and she had to make a crucial decision to save the lives of the patients still dependent on medical equipment. With the remaining power, she led her team to move the critical patients to a safer area. In an atmosphere filled with emotion and tension, they continued to fight until the first light of dawn began to appear on the eastern horizon. The sky over Los Angeles began to change color. Dawn slowly rose, pushing away the darkness of the night filled with tension. The flames that had once threatened Rahmat Hospital began to subside, as if held back by an unseen force. However, exhaustion was clearly visible on the faces of all those who had stood guard throughout the night. Their eyes witnessed a miracle, but their bodies had been pushed beyond their limits. Inside the hospital, Dr. Aisha Karim stood in the control room, monitoring medical equipment that was losing power as the backup generator had finally shut down. But she stood firm, her eyes locked on the last monitor still on, displaying the condition of the critical patients. "Layla, how is Adam?" she asked with a hoarse voice, having given instructions nearly non-stop through the night. "He's still holding on, but without the ventilator, his time is down to minutes," Layla replied in a tone of despair. Beside her, a technician was trying to fix the generator wires, but to no avail. Dr. Aisha bit her lip, thinking hard. She knew Adam was the symbol of their struggle that night. If they could save the little boy, they would also be saving the hope of everyone present. It was at that moment when hurried footsteps were heard. Daniel, the Jewish teenager who had been helping on the roof, ran into the control room carrying several long cables. "I know how to connect the emergency generator to the solar panels on the roof, but we need 5 minutes to install it," he said, panting. "Do whatever it takes to save lives," Dr. Aisha replied without hesitation. She then called a few staff members to help Daniel climb to the roof, even though the heat from the recent fire still lingered. On the roof, Daniel worked quickly, his hands shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. He was assisted by several Muslim youths holding flashlights to illuminate the cables that needed to be connected. As the seconds ticked by, those below could only wait anxiously. Suddenly, a soft hum was heard from the generator below. The ICU lights flickered back on, though dimly. Adam's medical equipment resumed functioning, and his heart rate monitor showed signs of stability. Everyone in the ICU let out a soft cheer, crying with relief. However, outside the hospital, the challenge was not fully over. The fire still burned in the distance, though the morning wind had now begun to blow a cool breeze, helping to slow its spread. Firefighters finally arrived on site with full equipment. They worked quickly to ensure that no flames remained around the hospital. By the time the sun fully rose, Rahmat Hospital stood strong. The building was marked with smoke stains on its exterior, but it remained intact. All the patients were safe, including Adam, who slowly began showing signs of consciousness. In the hospital yard, the community that had stood watch together all night began to gather. Imam Ali stood at the center, raising his hands to lead a prayer of thanks. People from different religions and backgrounds followed, some with their hands raised, others with heads bowed. Their prayers flowed in various languages, but their hearts united in the same sense of gratitude. "Allah has shown us what can happen when we unite," Imam Ali said with a voice full of emotion. "Tonight, we didn't just save a building. We saved humanity." Dr. Aisha, standing next to Imam Ali, couldn't hold back her tears. She felt that the miracle was not only the result of prayer, but also the courage, solidarity, and sacrifices of everyone present. News of the miracle at Rahmat Hospital quickly spread throughout the city. Local media covered the story with inspiring headlines: "Hospital survives fire," "A miracle in Los Angeles," and "Community solidarity overcomes disaster." Help began to pour in from all directions. A local businessman donated a new, more advanced generator. The Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities raised funds together to repair minor damage to the hospital. Even the local government issued an official statement praising the extraordinary courage and cooperation shown. Several weeks after the event, Adam, the little boy who had nearly lost his life that night, fully recovered. As he left the hospital, he held Layla's hand and said, "Thank you for saving me." Layla smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. "You are the reason we all held on, Adam. You are our little miracle." Rahmat Hospital had now become more than just a hospital. It had transformed into a symbol of unity and hope in Los Angeles. The small mosque inside it remained filled with prayers, but now those prayers came from everyone: Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and others. The plaque in front of the hospital, which had once only read Rahmat Hospital, was now accompanied by a new motto: "Here, humanity unites against the storm, together keeping hope alive." And thus, the story of that night full of tension and miracles would always be remembered as a reminder that when humanity unites, no disaster is insurmountable.